All right, guys, so we got some pretty crazy political shifts going on here with the Republican Party. The Republican Party is now in absolute panic mode because one of their deepest, greatest desires has actually happened, but it appears that it's backfiring. And so this article says, warning signs flash for Republicans on abortion ahead of 2024. Republicans are grappling with how they message on abortion in next year's election after the party suffered a defeat in the highly contested Wisconsin Supreme Court race on Tuesday. Milwaukee County Judge Janet Protasiewicz victory handed a majority to liberals on the court for the first time in 15 years. Wow, a decade and a half. Along with abortion rights activists fighting to make the procedure legal in the state following the overturning of Roe v. Wade last year. Her win follows a slew of Democratic and abortion rights victories across the country during last year's midterm. However, the liberal victory in a presidential battleground and hotly contested Senate state signals that Republicans and anti-abortion rights activists have a steep hill to climb going into 2024. And so this is a huge deal because this is Wisconsin, bro. Like, Wisconsin is a big deal of a state. It's a very serious state in terms of determining elections. Wisconsin is one of the 3 states that can determine an election. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania all can on alone determine an election. So it's a huge, important state. And you're going to see that people are really going to be holding on to this because it's a social issue. And so what are the Republicans and what are their analysis on this? So here's what it says. Because when you're losing by 10 points, there's a messaging issue, and abortion is still an issue, and we can't allow Democrats to define Republicans and put millions of dollars up in lies and have it go unanswered because the lies become the truth if they go unanswered. Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel told Fox News this week. McDaniel went on to call for Republicans to put Democrats on the defense on the issue by labeling them as extreme abortion. I'm a suburban woman, McDaniel said. This is not an issue that is going away for our party in a post-Dobbs world, and we can't put our head in the sand thinking that it's heading into 2024. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal's right-leaning editorial board wrote this week that Protasiewicz's win represents a 5-alarm warning for the GOP about 2024. The Wisconsin results show abortion is still politically potent. In a special election for the state Senate on Tuesday, the Republican candidate barely won in a longtime GOP stronghold in the northern Milwaukee suburbs, the board wrote. If Republicans can't win in Mequon, their legislative majorities will soon be imperiled, and you can move Wisconsin out of the swing state column for the presidency in 2024. Protasiewicz defeated her conservative opponent Dan Kelly by 11 points on Tuesday, a decisive victory for liberals, and the state Republican Senator Ron Johnson won by 1 point last year, and that President Biden won by less than a point in 2020. So this is a huge deal. And so obviously there's the thing about how it's so important, but then seeing how the Republicans are going to end up responding on this issue is a really big deal. And so what it seems like the Republicans are trying to say is, at least from what they're saying is, they're not saying we need to pull back on abortion, because I saw, I think Ann Coulter sent out a tweet saying that Republicans need to temper their anti-abortion policies because they're extremely extreme on it, right? And so they got away with being extreme on abortion because it was stare decisis, right? It was a 70-year precedent for Roe versus Wade. Nobody took it seriously because everyone really thought that it was just stuck there, like it couldn't be moved. And so they were able to rile up religious voters and those kinds of people without the blowback. But it turns out the stare decisis didn't hold. And so now it's overturned in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, right? So it's overturned and now it's having some massive political backlash. And so what we know in political science is people are much stronger about social issues and their personal views than they are economic issues. So people are more movable on economic issues, but when it comes to social issues, you're really stuck because you're kind of socialized from a young age on your views about social issues, race, religion, gender, etc. And so this can actually end up trumping a lot of other people's positions. However, it's more so this issue is about turnout. And so what a lot of elections ends up being it's that the election is not about how many people you can convince, but how many people you can turn out. And so really, if you're trying to win, really your goal more so should be, as opposed to trying to convince the other side, you want to turn out more people that already agree with you. That should be your goal. That's how you actually win an election. And so what we saw was abortion essentially erased the margin of increase for Republicans from inflation. It was 27 to 32. This is about a 5-point differential still in favor of inflation, but that effectively erased the entire margin pretty much. But they're responding by saying we need to change our messaging. So they want to make it seem like that they're not extremists. Even though they do want to ban it. And so I think Lindsey Graham was floating the whole thing of a national federal abortion ban. So a federal statute saying that abortion is banned, right? all these states passing 6 weeks, all this other stuff, right? So they are that way, but they're not responding by saying, hey, let's temper down. They're saying, hey, we need to change our messaging. And I think that's going to be a failure, not only for that, because you're just not going to be able to convince anybody. So it's a waste of time. Again, like going based off that political science, and I'm not sure if that, applies exactly here, but the thing ends up being that, the more you try to just change the messaging, you won't convince anybody to vote Republican, and you're gonna suppress the Republicans coming out, because you can only focus on a certain amount of issues. And so if you spend a bunch of your time trying to reframe the abortion debate, you'll just end up losing out on turnout that you could have got from Republican voters, and you're just going to end up helping You're going to end up helping Democrats. So I think that's actually a horrible strategy personally. But that's their call, obviously, right? And so there's just a bunch of this, and they're trying to say that, one of these people is trying to say that, quote, we have a lot of examples where governors were not afraid to talk about the issue and also took action the time after the decision of Dobbs, and they got re-election by huge margins. That's what Pritchard said, another, analyst basically. And so these are literally like solid red states outside of Georgia here. Like all of these, Florida, Ohio, South Dakota, and Texas, those are all reliably red. Those are really solid red states. So if you're going to model your strategy in swing states to determine elections based on your strategy in swing states, I think that your strategy is really horrible. And this is pretty cool. It's pretty hilarious. So it also talks about Ron DeSantis, who, by the way, this is a topic for another video, a subject for another video. But I think Ron DeSantis has fucked up because I think he's gone too fascist. I think he's misinterpreted his strategy, right? The only way DeSantis wins is a 1v1. He can't win a splintered primary against Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has like a 30-40% that will never leave him. But in a primary, you can win with just a plurality if there's enough candidates. That's how he won in 2016. If the Republican establishment had the unity to come around one singular candidate, Trump would have lost, but they didn't have that. So he won because they weren't able to come around one person, and ergo, he ended up victorious. And so he's going too far to the right. He's supposed to mention himself more as the center guy, not the fascist guy. And he had already had some fascist credentials in him, so he could have kept that support, or at least some of that support, and went like more mainstream. Trump actually did this kind of weird schizo strategy where he's also trying to make himself more like acceptable. I mean, he was like saying, complimenting Joe Biden. He was the one even saying that the Republicans need to be more calm on abortion due to Roe v. Wade. He was actually saying that too. So he was kind of doing that, whereas Ron DeSantis just like, let's ban everything we don't like. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's just completely wrong on that. But, it says former Nevada GOP Amy Tarkanian, who identifies pro-life, told the Hill that the possibility of a 6-week ban in Florida has opened up the can of worms once again on top of the liberal win in Wisconsin. This is obviously an issue that is so important to a number of voters that it will supersede other issues, Tarkanian said, citing Democrats' win on the issue in 2022. It's going to end up superseding issues for sure. Like it'll supersede something like inflation, for example. Like people are going to care more about having the right to choose more than they will about inflation on prices, especially since the inflation isn't as bad as it's not like we're in it's not like we're in the great stagflation era. We're not in that time frame right now, so it's not like that crazy. But yeah, man. So it's pretty interesting. She says, so if Republicans want to continue to do what Governor Ron DeSantis did and bring it down to a 6-week ban, if you're somebody who's pro-choice, that's a scary thought. She continued. And so it's a supermajority support most cases of abortion. So they're convinced that they can win it on the messaging grounds. I don't think it's possible. I don't think you're going to be able to convince them. You would have to temper yourself. You're just going to lose. Personally, is what I believe. I think you're just going to suppress the Republican vote because you won't convince any Republicans to come out to vote by basically saying, hey, we're not extreme on abortion. And then you're going to be forced into a point where you're going to have to renounce stronger positions like 6-week bans that are very highly evidenced, that we're trying to get. They were getting passed way before, a long time, right? And then, just all of this different stuff. You're going to have to renounce in the nationwide ban that was, floated by Graham or whatever. You're going to have to renounce all those. You're going to suppress the Republican outcome, and then you won't convince anybody because it's just not a convincible argument. I don't think it's going to work. So to me, their strategy sucks major wieners. So I think that like if you're a Democrat, this looks really good for you because I mean, shit, like they don't know what they're doing. The only strategy here is to calm down on abortion. That's your only possible way. If you calm down on abortion, that will temper or at least try to. But then the thing is, then you're suppressing your own people coming out because they're going to be less down to come out if you temper on abortion too. It's just like, I don't know, I think it was just a ticking time bomb that I think has exploded. Because again, they were in a perfect position because it was a judicial thing. It looked so rock solid, and there was 7 years of precedent, right? When stare decisis is the legal jurisprudential, ideology of whatever is precedent stands. Don't be an activist judge. Don't overturn the cases. That was the idea, and it didn't stand. It didn't hold. So what ends up coming down with this is it was just a perfect scenario that's not working anymore. And I don't really see how you can fix this because if you temper down on abortion, you're going to suppress your own vote, that strong religious vote, and all these people are not going to come out anymore. You're not going to get riled up. But then if you do go in pro-abortion, you're going to lose like so many people. So you're kind of screwed, honestly. So Republicans are in a really horrible position right now. And this is probably going to have a bigger, I don't know how much of an impact abortion will have on 2024 president, because I don't know how much impact a president can really have. The Roe v. Wade being overturned is not statutory, it's, common law, right? It's case law. So what impact can you really have? It's not executive law either. So I don't know how much impact it'll have. This is really going to have a huge impact because it's a justice, it's a judge, right? So they have their own state constitution, they have their own state statutes, they have their own everything in this. And so, she can be the deciding vote to determine whether or not abortion is considered legal or not. She gets to decide that, right? She can be the deciding vote. And so it obviously plays huge, right? In their interpretation of, is this pro-abortion statute, like this pro-choice statute in line with the state constitution? If it's Republican, they probably say no, like abortion is illegal, based on the Constitution. But they'll be like, no, like this statute is in line with the Constitution. Or maybe they interpret the Constitution as giving a right to abortion, period, and forget the statute. It's just constitutional law. It supersedes, right? So it has a big play. So I'm not exactly sure how much of an impact it'll have, but it had a huge impact on the midterms, even though that's not statutory. Even though the abortion thing isn't statutory, but, will there be a time expiration date for the justice seat? I don't know, but it'll be yet to be seen. But they are in full panic mode.